G'day everyone, my name is Hoy. If you've used Photoshop for a little bit of time, you've probably heard that you should master the pen tool to make accurate selections. So then you go to your pen tool, which is here, or P on your keyboard, and then you start clicking around, and then you get weird shapes like this, and then you get handles like that, and then these colors disappear as you click on it. And if you're anything like me, it all got too complicated and I just closed Photoshop down, never wanting to use the pen tool again. So this video will take you through step by step how to use the pen tool. Okay, so before we get started, let's answer what is the pen tool and why would we want to use it. Now, as you saw in the intro, the pen tool makes these kind of lines with these funny little bubbles here called control handles, and then you've got these anchor points here. And then depending on your settings, you've probably got these colors here, and then it disappears, and it looks intimidating if you don't know how to use it. And the reason why you want to use it is because these paths will make a very nice selection to make a mask. But then you might be thinking, well, why do I want to use such a complicated tool when I've got the object selection tool that makes a pretty good mask, the quick selection? Well, it depends on your use cases. So I've got a picture here which I've used the object selection tool to mask out one image and then using the same image using the pen tool. So this is the mask using the object selection tool and this is the mask using the pen tool. Now at a glance, you're most likely not going to notice a difference. Now let me demonstrate by just going into the object selection mask by pressing Option or Alt and then clicking on this mask here. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit and you can see that it's done a pretty good job, but you can see that this is not 100% perfect. If I go to the pen mask, you can see the difference. It's got really crisp edges compared to the object selection mask. So this is object selection, this is the pen mask. This isn't the point of saying, one is better than the other. It really depends on the use case, as I mentioned before. Okay, so let's get back to how to use the pen tool. Make sure that our pen tool is selected here and make sure that the pen tool, not the freeform or the curvature tool. The keyboard shortcut, as you saw, is P on the keyboard. You've got two options on the options bar here. You can make a shape or a path. To make a shape is actually what it says. I can make a rectangle out of this or whatever this shape is. Or if you want to make a mask, what you need to do is select the path option and not the shape. To help us use the pen tool, I'm going to bring up these texts here. One is a really blocky straight line text, which we're going to start off with, and then we're going to build on that. We're going to use a little bit of our skills to make curved lines. If you're following along and wondering what font I've used, for this font up here, I've used this font, the Interstate Condensed Black font, and for this one, which we'll get to later, I've used Cooper Standard Black. Okay, so let's get back to this one here. So make sure that our pen tool is selected. I'm going to just make a sample line. So click and click. You can see that my pen color is probably a little bit different to yours, and my icon, which is this pen icon here, may or may not be different. So if you don't see this pen icon here, is probably because you've got your caps lock on. So caps lock off and on. Now, if you've got your caps lock off, but still see this crosshair, your settings are probably a little bit different to mine. So I'm on a Mac, so I'm just going to go to the Photoshop menu here and going to go to settings. Now, if you're on a PC, your settings or your preferences are in your edit menu. So somewhere down the bottom here, I believe. So if I go to settings and then I go down to my cursor, you can select how your cursor is shown. I've got it on standard. You might have it on precise, which will give you this crosshair. So I'm used to standard, so I'm just going to press OK. Now the next thing that is probably different is the color and then the thickness of these lines here, which you can change using this gear icon here. So just click on this and then you can see that your thickness is 2, The default, I believe, is 1 pixel, and then my color is light red, and I'm using red because just to make it stand out for this tutorial. The default is this blue here, and then the stringy bit here is called the rubber band, and I like this rubber band on because it shows me where my next path is, and that's useful because, you know, I'm not guessing where the next point is. So this is off, so I don't know where my next point is, and this is on, and this gives me that stringy bit here. So I'm just going to select outside of this and just going to press undo a couple of times, and let's get started. So I'm just going to go zoom in a little bit. If you're following along, all we're going to do is just clicking the mouse. We're not going to click and drag, just click the mouse. So if you can click the mouse, you can follow along. I hope you can do that. So what we want to do is start off by a corner. What you don't want to do is start off, you know, in the middle of a straight line here. And that's because if you start off in a straight line, when you join your path up together, you might risk having a kinked line. So you always want to start off at a corner. So what you can do is click and then go to your next one, click, and then go to your next one, click. Now these are all straight lines. So what you can do to make sure that your lines are 100% vertical or horizontal, I can press shift on the keyboard, and you can see that it sort of snaps it into a perfect horizontal line. Now if I move this line, it will go to 45 degree, and then if I move it again, it will give me a vertical line. So I want a horizontal line here, so I've got shift on the keyboard selected or pressed, and then click on the mouse, and then shift on the keyboard, click on the mouse. I'm going to deliberately make this a wonky once just to show you how to fix this. So instead of clicking on this point, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. Instead of clicking right on the corner, let's say I missed it and then I clicked here. Now I can obviously do undo, so Command or Control Z, and that will bring me back. But sometimes you might have done this and then selected this, finish your path, and then you can't undo. Well, not unless you undo all these points as well, and which you don't want to do. So undoing is one option, but probably not the best option. To move this path or anchor point, this is called an anchor point, you can press Command or Control on your keyboard, and that will change your cursor into a direct selection tool, which is the white arrow. Once you have that, click and drag, and then move it back to exactly where you want it. And everything is good in the world again. So let's move down here, and you can see that I've run out of space, but I can't see the bottom of my H. So I can press spacebar and then click and drag up, and then I can see the rest of my H. So let's press shift on the keyboard, and then for this time I'm going to replicate an error again, and maybe not this bit here. I'm not going to click right on the corner. I'm going to click just outside of this. So I'm going to click and hold. So instead of letting go of my mouse, I can press the space bar and then just move it as I'm changing it. So let's replicate that. Just say I've made a oopsie, I've clicked on this, and without letting go of my mouse, I press spacebar, and then I can move this around. Let's press shift again, and then let go, and then go up here, press shift, and then just say for whatever reason I made an anchor point here, anchor point here, anchor point here, and then anchor point here. And then I realized there's too many anchor points. I actually didn't need these anchor points. So what I can do is hover over this, and then that will bring up the minus sign here. So once that's shown, click on that, and that will make that disappear. The opposite is adding an anchor point. So I'm just going to replicate a mistake, just going to zoom out here. So instead of selecting or making a corner here, I'm just going to deliberately just miss that and just go all the way here and go, oops, that is a mistake. Now this is a very obvious mistake. Now to add an anchor point, all you need to do is just go over the path with your pen tool, and then you can see that the cursor will change into this plus. Once you have it, click on it once and then press Command or Control, click and drag it to this point here. Now you can see that this is not what we want, right? So we want to convert this curve into a corner. So what I can do is press Option or Alt on my keyboard. Here you can see that my cursor has turned into this upside down V. Click once here and then it converts that into a corner. Now if I zoom in a little bit, you can see that my anchor point here isn't perfect. You can fix that by pressing Command or Control on your keyboard. Bring up our direct selection tool here, click and drag, and then you can perfect that. Now sometimes you made a selection like this or I made a path like this and then you just want to let go. You're like, oh, you know, in some tools I can click out here and then it deselected and this doesn't deselect. So to deselect your path, there's two ways. One is an official way and then the other way is, I guess, an unofficial way. So the official way, I guess, is pressing Command or Control and then clicking outside of your path here, and then that will disengage your path here. I'm going to undo that and then I'm going to show you the unofficial way, which is, drum roll, it's just pressing escape. Now the problem is that once you've disengaged it, then how do you get back to the path? All you have to do is go up to the last path here. You can see that the icon has changed into this chain, and then clicking once here, and then that will join it back up. Now once you join it back up, I should say that you got to make sure that the circle next to the pen icon is there. Otherwise it's not going to join the path. So as close as I am to this original anchor point here, see, it's not going to close it. I have to go onto the anchor point and make sure that the circle next to the icon is shown, and then that's closing the path here. Now, if you want to get the hang of the pen tool in your own time, I suggest you just trace out the rest of the letters. Now, the reason why we want to make a path, if you remember, is usually because we want to make a selection and therefore a mask out of this. There are three ways to make a selection. The first way is to use the Paths panel, which I've got here. Now, if you don't see your Paths panel, go to Windows and just make sure that Paths is checked. Now, before we move on, let's save the path. If you don't save it, the next path that you do might not be saved. So to save it, all you do is just double click on this, and I'm just going to type in hi-fi and press OK. To make a selection from the Paths panel, all you need to do is press this icon here, and then you get this classic marching ants here. Now I'm just going to undo that. I'm going to show you the second way. Now the second way, you've got to make sure that you've got your pen tool activated, not any other tool. And you've got to make sure that your path is also selected. So if your path is not shown, it's not going to work. So make sure that your path is selected. Make sure that your pen tool is selected. Right click on this and then go to Make Selection. This will bring up this Make Selection dialog box. This will give you more options. So if you want to feather this, if you want no feather, I can put 0 and then press OK, and then that will give us the same effect. Gonna undo that again. Now the third way is to use a keyboard shortcut. I can press Command or Control and then press Return, and that would not work, which usually does. So I'm just going to cancel out of that, and that's because this is a text layer. So if I just go back to my layers panel here and select any layer other than the text layer and then press Command or Control, and then that will give us the marching ants. Okay, so let's build on our skills now and let's do something with a bit of curves here, which is what I've got here. So I'm just going to go back to my layers here. And remember, the font that I'm using is Cooper Standard Black. Just going to click outside of that. I'm going to deselect this selection by pressing Command or Control D. And if you're making a new path, what you want to make sure is that you don't have this selected, because if you're making a new path like this, it's going to make the path on the same layer as your previous one. And if that's what you want, then that's okay. But if that's not what you want, I'm just undoing that. Make sure that your previous path is not selected by pressing anywhere here, and then you can start a new path. Let's zoom in here. Remember, the first thing that you will want to do is we want to go to a curve or a corner. So you don't want to select a straight line, because when you close your path, it might have a kink in it. Instead of clicking to make a path, what we're going to do is clicking and dragging. So clicking and dragging will give us these transform control handles. This is an anchor point and these are control handles. What these control handles do is influence your next path. Because my control handle is up and to the side, you see that it's kind of like a magnet that's pulling it towards it here. It can't fully pin it to where it is, but it's influencing it. And that's the significance of these control handles. So I'm just going to undo that. I'm just going to click and drag. And what I want to do is drag it in a direction where the next path is going to be, right? So I know that it's going to be here. I'm not going to drag it like this. I'm going to drag it towards the path direction. And I'm going to click and drag up because that's where my next direction is. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit and then I'm going to click and drag here. Now, the key question for most beginners is, how do I know where to place the next point? The first answer I'm going to give you, you're going to hate, is that it's going to come with experience. When I first heard that, I'm like, oh, I really hate that answer because it's not telling me where to put the point. The second answer, which hopefully is a little bit more satisfying, is that you want to put the next point where it has the next significant change in the curve. So this curve here is going down and to the right, right? So down, right. And somewhere here, it's going straight down and then to the left. And so this is where the next curve changes. So that's where I'm going to put my next anchor point. So click and drag. Now, if you want this directly vertical, you can press Shift, remember, and then this is somewhere what I want. And now I'm going to click and drag. Now, this is where I'm going to explain where the control handle comes in. You can see that this control handle is influencing this part of the path, and this control handle is influencing this part. This is too short. It's not influencing enough. So what I need to do is press Command or Control, and then I'm going to click and drag that down. I'm going to let go. I'm going to press Command or Control, click, and then just move that down. And you can see that by pressing Command or Control, it will influence both sides of the controls, right? If I want to only control or influence one side of the handles, I can press Option or Alt on my keyboard, and that will only change one side of the part. Just going to undo that and carry on. So somewhere here is going to be where my curve changes. So I'm going to click and drag. So here, you see that the control handle is a bit too far out. So I only want to control this side of the part. So I'm going to press Option or Alt on my keyboard, click and drag. I'm going to do the same, Option or Alt, and then just nudge it out to the side. I'm just going to go click and drag. I'm going to press Option or Alt just to select this bit here. Go up here, click and drag. Option or Alt. Now you see that I'm having trouble making a part that is snug against this letter here. Now what I can do, remember, is add an anchor point. Just make sure that you've got Auto Add and Delete selected, and then click, press Command or Control, click and drag, and all is well now. So let's click and drag. Let's carry on. I want it straight up. And I want to just adjust this, Option or Alt on the keyboard, and then just move that to how I want it. So click and drag. So just remember, whenever you want a curve, you want to click and drag. Whenever you want a corner, you want to just click. So click and drag, click and drag. So this is a tiny bit too long. So Option or Alt on the keyboard, just moving that up a little bit. So I'm just going to move this canvas around. So just press spacebar and then just drag my mouse. So click and drag. Now instead of letting go of my mouse here, I know that on this bit, on this side of the path, I want to shorten it. So instead of letting go, I can go Option or Alt on my keyboard as I'm dragging it, and then I can just influence one side of the path here. So something like this, I want to move it in the general direction of the next path I want, and I'm going to release that. So something like this, and then click and drag. So here it's not really hugging the letter, right? So I can bring back the control handle for this anchor point here by pressing Command or Control, click, and then just moving that down here, clicking and dragging. So click and drag, click and drag. So if you can't remember which one to press, Command or Option or Control or Alt, just use both. Just see what it does. And then sooner or later, you will get the hang of it. So I'm just going to press Option or Alt on the keyboard. Just bring that down a little bit. So click and drag. I'm just going to press Option or Alt as I have my mouse pressed to just reduce the length of this bit. And then maybe even a little bit more. So click and drag. So I'm just going to go really quickly now. So let me zoom out a little bit and just say that you've done all your path and you've made some changes and you've clicked out of it, you made some color grading, etc. And then you come back to it. So you go to your paths panel and then you click on that and you're like, oh, I need to change a little bit of this. How do I do that? So what you can do is press A on the keyboard and that will bring up your path selection tool. And that is your black arrow. So if I click on that, that will select the whole path, right? So my whole path is selected. But if you want to change one specific anchor point, you have to change your black arrow to the white arrow, so which is called the direct selection tool. And the difference is that if I just click on here, the difference is that I'm given the flexibility of just selecting this anchor point. So if I just zoom in here, you can see that the selection is in red here, or whatever color your path is in. So all the white ones are not selected. If I want to select multiple ones, I'm pressing Shift on the keyboard and then just clicking on that. And all the red ones are what is going to be selected. And then I can change that, you see. And everything else is unmoved. But if I use the black arrow, which is the path selection tool, even if I just click on one point, the whole path is selected. And that is the difference between the black arrow, which is the path selection tool, compared to the white arrow, which is the direct selection tool. So I've moved my path, so I'm just going to undo that. And I'm going to save that by double clicking on it. And I'm just going to put hello and press return on the keyboard. Just going to zoom out a little bit, and obviously you can go through it and do the rest of this. Now if you want to build up your skills a little bit more, what I suggest is going through some icons and not just going to deselect out of that and not going straight into actual pictures. So I've downloaded some icons here. The links are in the description, and what you want to do is just practice your skills here. Now I'm not going to go through this, but what I want to give you is some tips to do with corners and curves. So here you can see a corner here, so I'm just going to grab my pen tool P on the keyboard and let's just zoom in here, click once here and then click and drag to make a curve here. I may have overshot this, so I'm just going to press spacebar on my keyboard and something like this. So to shorten it like that, and then just going to go real quick like this. What I want to show you is this bit here. You see, this bit is actually a corner here. So for a corner like this, I'm just going to click and then that will give me the corner that I want. But I'm going to show you another corner where I can't just simply click. So let me just do this very quickly. And it's this corner here. So if I just click here, you see how this path doesn't actually suit it, right? So I can't just click for a corner. What I have to do is click and drag this out. So this path here is where I want it. And now what I need to do is move this control handle by pressing Option or Alt on my keyboard, clicking and then just readjusting the direction here and then continue on my way. So it really depends on what the corner is. Now I'm just going to deselect out of that. Another issue that you might face is that say that you've done a corner but you actually wanted a curve now. What do? What you can do is go back to our direct selection tool here. And then just go back to our pen tool P on the keyboard and then press Option or Alt on the keyboard and then just start dragging out. Once you drag it out, then it becomes a curve here. And conversely, if you want to change or convert a curve to a corner, all you do is go to the anchor point, press Option or Alt and then click once here, and then that will snap it back into a corner. Now the last bit I want to show you is that I want to show you where I got the icons from. Now the icons come from freepik.com, which is a pretty good free website. There are premium stuff which you don't need to use. So in the assets, click on icons and then search for whatever you want. So if I want to see some flames, I can just search for flames, and these are the results. So just click on one, download it, and then just practice with whatever you want. So I hope that was helpful. Hopefully that will lessen your phobia of the pen tool. The key to this really is just keep practicing. And your best friends in terms of keyboard shortcuts is your Option or Alt keys, your Command or Control keys, and your spacebar keys.